All right, everyone. So thank you for being with us again today. Today we will be discussing the UC application. And first things first, this is the application timeline. So as most of you know, the deadline to apply is November 30th, and you can begin filling out your application as soon as August 1st. You will receive a notification of your admissions decision between February to March. So some campuses might let you know as early as February, but they all have pretty much until the end of March to notify you. So if you find out that your friend hears back from a campus in February, and you haven't heard back yet, don't panic. That's totally normal. Some colleges take a little bit longer to get back to students, but they have until March 30th. And then by May 1st, you need to send in your SIR, or otherwise known as your Statement of Intent to Register. And that is basically your way of letting the college know, whatever college you decide to go to, that I will be attending your institution. And so by May 1st, you'll commit to one school and you'll send in your security deposit pretty much. And for the UCs, it's $250. You should only send it to one UC if you end up going to a UC. Don't send it to more than one school. And you can do this usually by logging into your portal and just selecting like accept and then pay any required fees. And then some students may be put on a wait list, and you'll receive your waitlist admission decision, your final admission decision, between May and then sometimes even up until July. So it can be a little bit later. Okay, so before you start, before you actually submit your application, it's important that you've done your research and you know what the UCs are about, you know which one has your major, you have an idea of, if you're going to be a good fit for that school or not. Just really make sure that you're taking the time to look into the campuses. Hopefully you've attended a visit, a virtual college visit, or maybe you've reached out to the university to ask some clarifying questions. Make sure you really take the time to get to know each of the UCs before you submit your application. Some of them have, certain specialties, like UC Irvine has a ton of really awesome options for psychology. So like I studied psychology at Cal State Long Beach, and I didn't know that UC Irvine had so many different psychology disciplines. And I feel like had I known, I probably would have applied to that school too. Because they just seem very interesting. So just kind of be on the lookout for things like that, which UC has a certain like specialty in certain majors. Some UCs don't allow freshmen to apply directly into the major, like Berkeley, right? Like their School of Business, you have to apply once you're there. So making sure that you're understanding things like that, knowing kind of what you're getting yourself into. Some UCs require that you take certain general education requirements that others don't. And general education requirements are things like basically you have to take a certain number of general classes that just give you a foundation to learn your basic math, English, science, history, and then some electives. So those might differ between the UCs. Some of the graduation requirements might differ. And that's true too for some of the Cal States. So if you're applying to CSUs like San Luis Obispo, they allow you to, for engineering, they allow you to like really go right into your major and start to take some engineering courses. Whereas some CSUs say, no, like you need to take other courses before you can start taking your major courses. So knowing things like that are important. Write your responses to your personal insight questions. I would suggest doing that on a Google Doc before actually writing it in your application. And create a document outlining all of your activities, your volunteer work, community service. You probably already have all of this information in your resume in Naviance, or maybe in your own personal resume. But if not, just make sure you have all of that information kind of together before you start your application. It's also important that you have an official copy of your transcript. So you'll want to do a good job at inputting all of your courses accurately. And then that leads me to my next topic, importance of accurate details. So make sure that you are really inputting everything accurately. Don't fabricate your activities or your awards. You don't want to lie when you're talking about your story in your personal insight questions. When in doubt, honesty is the best policy. And I think now more than ever, there was obviously some scandals within the last few years in terms of college admissions. I think colleges are going to be even more on the lookout for things like that, and they may reach out to you to verify if the information is accurate or not. So, just be authentic, be yourself, and they should really admit you for who you are and where you are. If you feel like you don't have a lot of activities or awards because of, family commitments, or maybe you had to work to help out your family financially, then talk about that. That's something that they definitely value and they appreciate. And so, you can include that information and you can kind of let them know why you weren't able to be as involved as you would have liked to be. Or maybe you have some siblings at home and your parents work full-time jobs and they're super busy and they really depend on you to help take care of your siblings after school. Talk about that and talk about it in detail. Like, really let them know what your situation is so that they can take that into consideration. Because the nice thing about the UCs that Cal States don't offer is that UCs are holistic. So they will take everything into consideration. They will take your family circumstances, your extracurriculars, your activities, your classes, but also unique situations like, hey, I had to watch my sister after school every day, feed her and help her with her homework, and that's why I wasn't able to be involved. They'll definitely consider that. And then use the additional comment section in the after inputting your academic courses if you need to explain any kind of unique situations on your transcript. So if you had like a decline in your grades, for example, so say you started doing really well freshman year and then you had a dip in your grades sophomore year and you weren't doing as well, and that was due to a specific situation, then you'll want to talk about that in the additional comments section. Explain why that was. Maybe you had a family member that was sick and ended up having to be in the hospital for a few months and your focus was just completely off. Or maybe something else happened and you feel like you really need to clarify that to them. Make sure you're inputting that information in the additional comments section. All right, so most of you probably know what the minimum requirements are to get into a UC, but the GPA, the minimum GPA is a 3.0 weighted A through G 10 through 12 GPA. I probably kind of said that funny, but basically they look at grades 10 through 12 and it's your weighted A through G GPA. And so that's the minimum requirement. But as a lot of us know, UCs are very competitive. And so you'll definitely want to shoot for higher than that, but that's the minimum to be considered for admissions. And then for A through G requirements, hopefully you've had that conversation with your counselor about making sure that you're on track with your A through Gs. But that is a set of courses that the UCs expect that you take. So it's like your 4 years of English, 2 years of a history, things like that, 1 year of a college preparatory elective. And the only changes that they had in A through G subjects is that for area D, they've now expanded it to include computer science, engineering, and applied science. All right, so the way that the University of California, the way that all of the UCs determine admissions is they have what's called their comprehensive review, and that includes 14 different criteria that they consider when reviewing your application. So that's things like academic achievement, personal and school context, special talents, life challenges, special circumstances, the number of honors and AP classes that you've taken advantage of. They'll look to see the rigor of your senior year. Are you still challenging yourself even though it's your last year of high school? But you can basically Google like UC 14 admissions criteria and you can see a list of every single thing that they will consider when reviewing your application. So it's not just grades and like AP exams. All right, so when completing the application, you'll want to make sure that you select fall semester 2021 And your application level, all of you should be considered a freshman. Okay, when you get to the campuses and majors part, some campuses will consider you for an alternative major or an alternate major. So you'll choose your primary major, the one that you definitely want to get admitted for. But then some campuses will say, if we don't admit you for your primary major, we may consider you for your second preference major, your alternate major. Not all colleges will have this option. So UC Berkeley is one that does not consider alternate majors. And then UCLA has told us, it's kind of funny because they have said like, we hardly ever consider an alternate major, but they still give you the option to choose an alternate major. Maybe things have changed now due to the pandemic. Maybe they're a little bit more flexible. But yeah, that's something to be mindful of, that not every single campus will have this option. But sometimes it's helpful if you choose an alternate major in a different college. If the first major that you're choosing is in a college that's super impacted, but you should still choose an alternate major that is similar to what you want to study or something that you're still like very much so interested in. I wouldn't choose something that you think is like less impacted and you just want to get in, because it doesn't always work out once you're there. So sometimes when you get to a college campus, it's challenging to transfer into a major that's very impacted. It's a lot easier to just be admitted for the major that you really want to study. Okay, so if you've started your UC application and you added UC San Diego, you probably noticed that you have to rank 7 of their colleges that they have. So it's kind of weird, but basically if you click on this website, learn more about UC San Diego's college system, you can learn a little bit more about each one. But hopefully some of you attended Mountain View's UC San Diego college visit today at 11, and hopefully she was able to give you some more information about the colleges. But basically there's 7 colleges. You have to rank them in order of preference. And this is really important because each one has a different set of general education classes, and each one has a different like philosophy, kind of like a different vibe. So you definitely want to make sure you take some time to do some research and figure out which college you feel like you'd be the best fit for. I believe each one, depending on which one you're admitted for, that's where you'll be living too. Like you'll be living within that college. Is there anyone in here that attended the UC San Diego college visit that has anything else they'd like to add to that?
I attended, and you just summarized it really nicely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Los Altos had the visit yesterday, but what you just said was really helpful.
Okay, awesome. Cool. But yeah, just pretty much when in doubt, just kind of look into it, take some time to do some research. Okay, so in this portion, you'll be able to add middle school coursework, and the UCs and the Cal States will consider 7th and 8th grade math or language other than English courses in middle school to fulfill A through G requirements. So your middle school courses do not need to be on your high school transcript. But again, honesty is the best policy. Make sure that you're not, lying about any of this information. They could reach out to you and ask for your academic records from middle school to make sure that you actually did complete like the appropriate math or LOTE, language other than English class. And so this is what it looks like. You'll just say yes, and then you'll add the course name and the time period or the term period. Okay, and then this is what it looks like when you're adding a high school. You'll want to make sure that you include all high schools that you've attended. And then you'll obviously enter the month and the year, and the end date will be June 2021. And then this is kind of showing you what it looks like when you're adding courses. So as you can see, due to the pandemic, they changed it. So now they gave you the option to include either pass, no pass, or credit, no credit. So you can choose that option for what they're calling a COVID term. And so COVID terms include winter, spring, and summer 2020. If you don't see a course that pops up from the drop-down menu, you are able to add it in manually, although, sometimes you might just be typing it in wrong and that's why it's not popping up. So just make sure you're double checking everything. And then for 12th grade, since you don't have official grades yet for your 12th grade courses, it automatically will default to IP for in progress for the fall. And then for the spring, it'll be planned, PL. And then for first semester grades, if you've taken a class and it's only one semester, you'll enter the grade as in progress, for example, for senior year for fall. And then for spring, you would select NO for not offered during spring. And then you'll include all courses in your UC application, even if you have repeated a course and passed it with a passing grade. That's different from the Cal State application. So for Cal States, if you took chemistry and you got a D one year and then you remade it up the following year and you got a B, you would not need to report that D for your Cal State application. But the UCs are different. They do calculate all of your grades for GPA purposes, and they do want you to report everything. So again, honesty is the best policy, and they will be receiving your high school transcript at one point anyways, and so they will be seeing that information. So you want to make sure it's accurate. All right, so for this is what it looks like when you're entering community college coursework in your application. If you have completed a community college class at a California community college, then a UC transferable course list will populate. And it's really easy. It's really nice because you'll just be able to basically check off the box next to the community college class that you took, input your grade, and then click on save. You don't need to enter classes that you took for just pass or credit unless it was a COVID term. And the only other exception is if it was a English and math class. So if you took a UC transferable English and math class, you would still add it. And then other non-UC transferable coursework can go into the other coursework section of your application. So I feel like I might maybe kind of said that a little bit weird. So I'll just repeat it one more time. So for non-UC transferable English and math classes, you will still add them to your college coursework section of your UC application. If you took a class prior to COVID and you received pass or credit, you don't need to report it. And then other non-UC transferable classes can go into the other coursework section of your application. And then there's another opportunity to write about an additional comment or a special circumstance. And that can be anything that has significantly impacted your educational experience. So for example, if you feel like you can talk about something relating to maybe the pandemic that actually had like a really great effect or impact on you, or maybe the social justice movement or something specifically happened and you want them to know about it, you can use this area to talk about that experience. But it's up to you. You don't have to fill this out if you feel like you don't have anything to add. All right. So the activity in the awards section is next, and there is 6 different categories for activities and awards. So there's awards or honors, educational prep programs, so that can include things like AVID. Awards or honors can be recognized at the state level, the county level, nationwide, or at the school-wide level. If you have an award or an honor at the school-wide level, you'll just want to provide context so that they really get a good understanding of what that award was. So for example, if you were like selected out of 500 students and you won the award, you'll want to provide that information so they have an idea of like what that award was like and kind of the meaning behind it, and make sure that they are understanding like the recognition that you received too. Extracurricular activities. So you'll want to include things that, demonstrate your interest, are meaningful, and if possible, display your leadership skills. Other coursework, so I talked about that a little bit earlier, but that can include things that are non-A through G. So if you took like a career technical class or like an ASB class or like a yearbook class, and it doesn't count for A through G credit, then you can include that class here. You don't need to include things like PE though in this part of your application. And then again, volunteer and community service, you'll want to include things that demonstrate leadership skills that are meaningful to you. The longer that you've been in something, so if you've volunteered from freshman year until now, that really shows that you're committed and that you're really dedicated to something. So that's always great. So if you're trying to like determine which if you have a lot of different volunteer opportunities to choose from and you're trying to figure out which ones to add, choose the ones that are the most like meaningful, the most significant, and the ones that you've been in, for a long period of time. And then work experience. The UCs love work experience. So if you have work experience, definitely add it. This, can show them that you have good leadership skills potentially, that you potentially work well in teams, that you are responsible and can balance both work and school. And again, if you are working because you feel like you really need to help out your family financially, then definitely talk about that in your application. All right, so when inputting like the description of what you did in your extracurricular activity, you'll really want to focus on your roles, your responsibilities and accomplishments, maybe what you did for other people, how you helped out the team, things like that. Not so much like the activity itself. You don't need to go into too much detail about, but more so like what was your role, what did you do, what did you achieve during that time, and maybe how you helped other people. And then for awards and honors, they want to know what that award was and why you were chosen for that award. So make sure you are explaining that in as much detail as you can within the 250 word maximum that they give you. And then I know we had our personal insight question workshop, so I won't go into too much detail, but just as a reminder, you are choosing 4 out of the 8. You have a maximum of 350 words to respond to each of the questions. All questions have equal value. There's no advantage or disadvantage to choosing certain questions over others. So truly just choose the ones that you feel like you connect to the most and you feel like you can really speak to the most. And just another friendly reminder that PIQs or personal insight questions are supposed to be about you. So try to avoid talking about other people. If you are talking about someone that you look up to and you idealize, don't go into too much detail about them, right? Like still bring it back to you and you're wanting to remember that the UCs use these personal insight questions almost as though they're interviewing you. So they're really trying to figure out like what your personality is like and if you're going to be a good fit for their school. The UC personal insight questions are not an English essay, so no need to include like an intro, body paragraphs, and a conclusion, or like an interesting hook or anything like that. They really are designed for students to be direct and to the point. And you'll want to talk about things like what you learned and how did you apply what you learned to other aspects of your life. All right, so then this is what that section looks like in your application. This is the additional comment section for personal insight questions. And so there's 2 different areas where you can provide additional comments. There's one after you enter all of your academic courses. And so in that additional comment section, you can talk about things like maybe why there was a grade dip or something like that relating to your transcript and your academics. And then for your personal insight question, these can be circumstances that are not shown in other parts of your application. So things that have significantly impacted you. And so I mentioned earlier, beyond what all other students have experienced due to the pandemic and the social justice movement, is there something that maybe like you specifically went through, or was there like a time where you really like maybe you felt discriminated against, or maybe someone in your family actually got sick from COVID, and like what was that experience like for you? If it took a toll on you and it caused some type of challenge in your life, then this is that time where you can talk about it. All right, so then when you get to the review and submit section of your application, you'll see a check mark next to each category, and that is letting you know that you have successfully completed that section. So you should not submit your application until you see all of those blue check marks next to each category. And then you'll get to this screen, the A through G requirements, and you'll want to make sure that everything says 0 next to each category, because that says up at the top, number of missing requirements. So if you see a number and it says you're missing 1 year of math, that may mean that you just forgot to input something in your application. So just make sure you go back and you make sure that you've added all of the courses that you've taken in high school to make sure that you have fulfilled your A through G requirements, because that's obviously a requirement for admissions purposes. Okay, so fee waiver eligibility, this information is based on your household income and your household size that you report within your application. So, and if you are eligible, you'll just want to make sure that you select yes, I would like to accept the fee waivers, and then you would check off that box and then you would submit your application. So they give you 4 fee waivers. So that's why you can see in this screen, this student is applying to 4 UC campuses, and they were eligible for a fee waiver. So they had all 4 campuses, all of the applications are waived. And then if the student was, for example, applying to an addition, maybe they were applying to 5 UC campuses, then they would just pay that $70 for that one application, since the other 4 were waived. Again, the information is based on what you report in your application under like the financial information section. So just make sure that you're really reading those questions thoroughly and reporting it accurately. And then one thing to note about the UC fee waiver is that they also accept, so if you're not eligible for a fee waiver within the application, if you received an SAT or an ACT fee waiver, they do accept those college application fee waivers that you receive through SAT. So in your College Board account, you receive 4 college application fee waivers, and the UC will accept those. And so the way you would go about applying that fee waiver is when you get to this portion of your application, you'll say, there's another actually screen that it's like the payment screen. So you'll check off the box that says pay by mail, and then you'll actually mail the UC Application Center your College Board SAT fee waiver, and it'll give you the address of where it needs to get mailed to. And they actually do accept those fee waivers as well. They also accept other fee waivers like the NACAC fee waiver. So if you qualify for that, you can just look up like NACAC fee waiver eligibility requirements. Just let your counselor know, and then they can look into completing that with you. And they accept that fee waiver as well. But again, no more than 4. And I believe they use the same for fee waivers. They're looking at the same eligibility requirements that are used for free and reduced lunch. So if you receive and are eligible for free and reduced lunch here at Mountain View or at Los Altos, then you should be eligible for a fee waiver. All right. So once you get to the screen, you'll see your application ID number. It's important to record that number somewhere, have it safe online, because you will need it most likely at some point. And then you'll just see like your confirmation ID. It's always good to just take a picture of the screen and just save it somewhere safe, just so you like have confirmation that you did successfully submit your application. And then in your application, after you apply, there are very few things that you can update. There's not a lot that you can change. So before you submit your application, just really make sure that you're taking the time to really thoroughly go through it, make sure everything looks great and excellent before you click that submit button, because again, there are very few things that you can update. So that this screen is showing you what you can update within your application, and that's things like test scores. So say you reported that you're planning on taking the SAT, you can come back in once you receive your scores and input those scores in your application. You can update personal information. So say like you realized you put, maybe the wrong email address or something like that, you can update that. And you would do so by logging back into your application and clicking on My Account. If you have any changes to your activities, although it's rare that those changes are going to make like a huge impact at that point, if you feel like you really want them to know about it, you would just contact the UC Application Center and let them know of the changes. And then you would contact your individual UCs as well so that they can like add it to your file or add it to your record. And I would say that's worth doing. Like if you started a new club or you joined this really awesome volunteer experience that you really want them to know that you're now doing and it's like really helping out the community or something like that. I definitely think it's worth mentioning it to them and they can include that in your file. All right. So this is just a reminder, Los Altos has a really awesome Instagram page, so feel free to follow them. They post really great information about college visits and things like that. These are our websites. Mountain View's website is you can go to www.mvhsccc.net. Laura, is that pretty much what yours is too? MVLA.
I'll
Or
drop it in the
sorry.
chat. It's a little bit, I think, different.
Okay, so you can take a baby picture of the screen and you can access their website there. Can they also access it from the Los Altos website?
Yes, it is linked from the Los Altos website.
Okay, perfect. So you can access it there. And we post things like scholarship opportunities, job opportunities if we hear about anything. We have an events tab on there, programs and opportunities. So feel free to check that out. And then this is what's coming up next week. We'll be discussing financial aid. So make sure you bring your questions with you. And that's it. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and end my recording.